Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Dharma Punx Seattle. We're a newer meditation society here in Seattle, Washington. This is our first ever day-long retreat that we've offered, and we have a guest teacher here. This is Reverend Seho Morris, very dear friend of mine, very influential teacher in my own practice, has decades of recovery from substances, and also has spent many years in monastic Zen robes. So he's going to bring a different influence and different twist than what we would normally see in Dharma Punx. And I'll leave it there and let him tell you all the rest.
Thank you, thank you. Do you have a schedule for today?
Yes, I do.
Perfected. So, good morning, or as we say in Japan, Ohayou gozaimasu. So we're going to run a fairly tight schedule today. So this is going to be a Dharma download. And the idea is to change kind of the narrative. Let's start with introductions, just so I have an idea and who you are. And also, if you had any kind of like question in terms of like practice, like something that you would like to hear about, discussed in terms of addiction, recovery, meditation practice, and things like that, that could be helpful. So I can potentially answer that. So we can start with from the left.
I'm David. I'm a kid. I just got my text from North Point that I'm a point out of inpatient, so I'm still a baby in recovery.
Well, congratulations.
I do have a history, a contemplation history also, but not the same. Different tradition. My teacher is Shogo Naokai Nobu from 1970. With them for like 20 years, 25 years. That's a little narrative.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hi, I'm Blair. I came to Buddhism through refuge recovery. I have been coach for years, so just, dabble in it a little bit. My practice has been a little off since having my baby 9 months ago. So I thought that this would be nice, just a little refresh and a little self-care. So.
Excellent.
I'm Moss. I started coming here a few months ago. Bree invited me. It was really cool, and I've been. It's been a really great tool for insight into just a lot of things regarding either my sobriety, which has been on and off over several years, but it's a lot of behavioral things that I just continuously, every week I come back, I find another insight into what it is I'm doing and different things that are, there's always an applicable thing. I feel like every time I walk away from here, I have another tool that says, this is going to help you in my whole issue, which we all have underlying issues.
Right.
I'm still fairly new to practice, but this has been a very good weekly part. This has become part of my routine.
Thank you.
do probably have a question at some point. I'll figure out how to word it. Maybe there's time later.
Mhm.
I'm Danny. I got into Buddhism and Stoicism by accident in the
Ooh.
hospital program for burnout, depression, anxiety, all of that stuff. Where they were teaching therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectic behavioral therapy, and there was quotes from this guy called Buddha and this guy called Marcus Aurelius and stuff. And that led me to just kind of seek those things out. And Amazon algorithms started giving me books. So the first Dharma Punx book I wrote, or I read, was Unsubscribe from Josh Corda.
Mhm,
And during the pandemic, I discovered that he would do Zoom calls, so I started joining those.
Mm.
And after that, when all the lockdowns started to end, he started doing retreats, so I started going to New York to go to his retreats. And then after that, then he started mentoring me, I suppose.
Mm.
So he's, I guess, my introduction to Buddhism, I suppose. So that's why I'm here. I'm not actually in recovery, so I might be different from some of the other folks, so I don't really know about refuge recovery or anything like that. So, yeah, that's how I ended up here, because I discovered that there was a Dharma Punx in Seattle that was starting up by accident. Algorithms again, and I started coming. And I try to come here every week, and then I do the Dharma Punx New York via Zoom every week as well. So.
Thank you. Neo, the Matrix, will find you through the algorithm.
Yes.
Heather.
Yes, hello. I don't have a lot to share, I think, at this current time. I'm just grateful to be here.
Glad that you're here. Thank you.
I'm Matt. I've been in recovery for about a year and a half, and I first came to meditation through my recovery program in North Point. I do refuge recovery, so that's my weekly practice right now, and I think I'm here out of curiosity and interest to go a little bit deeper, and also just kind of feeling a little bit of a plateau in my life right now, and hoping to maybe get some insight or inspiration in myself so I can push through that and see what's next.
Cool.
My name's Eric. Familiar with Dharma Punx for a long time, primarily from the old Seattle Capitol Hill meeting. Yeah, most aligned with Zen practice and Shoboji Genjo.
Mm.
I see as a good teacher. And yeah, I'm also in recovery.
Okay. Genjo is my ordination Roshi.
Me?
Hi. Yes.
Hi, I'm John. Been in refuge recovery for 9 years. I missed the part where you told me what I was supposed to say.
Just here you are. And if you had any question that you might want answered today, specific related to practice related.
Pass.
Okay. Cool. All right. So I'm going to switch with John because since we're on like a tight timeline, and I'm going to drive the narrative, and this will also drive discussion, and so we can understand the parameters of what we're doing. If I'm in the way, you're invited to move to catch in to what we're going to talk about. Let's see if this works out. Yes.
Then I should move the mic.
Okay, but I can be loud. I'm black and I'm proud. Let's see. So if you do get a chance, please familiarize yourself with the schedule. And, okay. So what we're going to talk about is obviously this aspect of practice, which is reverse origami. So there's a folding that begins to take place. Can we like, maybe dim the lights a little bit, because that'll make it easier to read the screen. Oh, that's Pavarotti. Okay, so that said, and I love origami myself. So this said, we're going to start with the Mumonkan. Mumonkan in Japanese means the gateless barrier. Generally speaking, this is a book of koan study. Koan is a Japanese word. It means place where the truth is. The word Zen, by the way, means it's a Japanese expression for unification. So like the word yoga, some people were not aware that it means the union or unification as well. So all these words, while they seem kind of esoteric and mystical, they're really only talking about one thing, which is unification physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually across 4 apertures. So the gateless barrier, as it turns out, is the mind. It has a tendency and a quality to have like a certain solidity to it, yet we're in a virtual reality headset of thought mostly. And we're going to talk about how that works and how that plays into what people describe as addiction. So that said, so just very briefly, I call this collision insurance, and everybody is going to have mistakes and mistakes, or these thoughts or ideas. Oh, I said the wrong thing. I did the wrong thing. I invite, if you feel like we need to do some relational repair, we whip out the policy today, and make sure that we're in harmony with each other, and we're creating a safe container of practice, because we're going to go deep. And that said, Zen is not therapy. Zen is reality, is important. So there are actually the Zen psychotherapy, I think by Dr. Mark Epstein, and it can be used in therapy because what Zen is fundamentally doing is helping us to pause long enough, attentionally, to recognize reality. That said, this is going to be in the dialectic, we call it in Zen world, we call it mondo, so it's give and take. And this is one of the things, satsang, this was actually one of the traditional practice of Gautama Buddha, where there's this back and forth to establish or dive into or look into what's going on into thought processes, because what we'll find a lot of times is we have these, someone mentioned earlier, cognitive biases or these cognitions, tendencies that we lean into psychologically, and we have a pretty strong loyalty to them because they're connected kind of like to survival. Whether or not that's accurate or not is debatable. But that said, it's through conversation that we can go at this. And this is, I always like to say, test drive, don't buy. So I'm going to give you a lot of things because Dharma Punx is practicing primarily from the perspective of the Theravadan, whereas Zen is the Mahayana. And this is one of the things, so people tend to see these as sects. They're not actually sects. And like Lama Norbu, trained under Lodogoro Rinpoche, as well as some teachers over at Sakya Monastery here in Seattle. And so that said, the nicest descriptor I had was from Kinjampa Rinpoche over at Sakya Monastery. So we could think of practice as a river. And so the first, let's say, 3 miles, like this is like the Mississippi River. Mississippi riverboat captains were only really responsible for knowing 3 miles of the river. And then the person would get off, and they'd get on the next boat, and then 3 miles and 3 miles. So imagine that Theravadan Buddhism is a starting position and you're riding 100 miles in the boat. Then when you get off of the Theravada, you get into, let's say, the Mahayana, which is considered, so Theravada is, I'm working on my personal awakening. Mahayana, okay, now that I've had my clarity or my awakening, I'm caring about everybody else, and so I want to make sure that other people are not suffering. And this is the functional orbit of this conversation. It's about suffering and how to authentically end that relationship with suffering. It's not that pain goes away, but the narratives, related to what produces the suffering, and we'll talk about how that actually operates. And so once you go through that aspect of the path, or kind of integrate, so there's 4 aspects I like to talk about in practice, which is imitate, assimilate, integrate, and then innovate. That you come to kind of this understanding of yourself, and you kind of have your own flow path, and this is the traditional practice. But then the next stage is what we call the Vajrayana. In Vajrayana, Buddhism, this aspect in Buddhism can actually be translated as universal loving presence for Western culture, just like Dharma could be either reality or the reality of grace. So there were a lot of translations that were originally used. People were doing the best they could with what they thought the English meant, but the truth is that we have some very poor translations, and so that's part of what I do at the monastery. So this is about a part of the test drive, don't buy. So we're going to talk about this, but this last piece of Vajrayana, imagine being in the ocean, and there's no way to orient other than the stars. So you're away from the shore, you can't see land. So you can imagine that the Vajrayana is a lot like that, and that's where sometimes in Tibetan practice, you could think of it as crazy wisdom. So that said, the housekeeping, we need vulnerability. We need also, we're sharing time and space, so the invitation is not to dominate time, but to share time with others in this platform. And please, to the best of our ability, like this mistake and mistakes, like being on stage, that we have respect for each other's personhood, and we try to have a conscious contact or alertness or awareness to how people are responding, not just with our ears, but with our eyes, and how we see people emote. I've been in addictions work for quite some time, more than 2 decades, and so I've seen patients that were under my care. They would said, "I want to kill myself," and they were smiling and laughing at the same time. So just because you say one thing, the visuals, they don't always sync up. So it's important to have that clarity and that alertness. Okay, so now this is where we jump in. And Bree, can you help me manage the time? Let me know when I have 5 minutes before this part is supposed to end. I think it's 11:10. So that's it. So to talk about addiction, and this could be helpful even to those who don't have it. Okay, so in terms of addictions treatment, what we would think substance use, heroin, alcohol, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, one of the things is that everybody is failing equally. It doesn't matter what the model that you are using is. It can be abstinence-based, it can be what we call MAT, or now the modern term is MOUD, where people are on methadone, Suboxone, naltrexone, they can be on Vivitrol shots, yada, yada, yada. Doesn't matter, but the issue is that no matter how much money we're throwing at it, the addiction rate is actually escalating. So if I asked you last year, 2023, that's the last time we have the statistics from NIH, how many people would you guess, and I don't expect you to have the accurate answer, died from opiate use? Any version of opioid use, all the numbers combined in 2023.
100,000.
Huh?
600,000.
600. It was actually 185,000 people died in 1 year. Now here's the interesting thing with alcohol. People are like, it's alcohol, but like heroin, fentanyl, yada yada yada. It's so terrible, it's so bad. It would so you would make a mistake if you thought that alcohol goes easier on people, because in parallel, we lost about 185,000 people related to alcohol-related deaths. So if your number's going, now, so that's just the substance use. That doesn't talk about how many people are actually addicted. And then if you're talking about, because these numbers are actually from NIH, National Institute of Health, what about depression? What about, all these other things? So once in those, we're just talking about completed suicides. So the numbers are staggering. So in terms of dealing with mental health, we're failing. And so one of the things is, if you're failing that hard for such a long time, it would logically occur to you that maybe we need to try something different, because you're trying to do all these same and different things, but you're not actually getting a different result. And so one of the things is this issue, which is, well, what's actually driving the behavior? So you could spend a lot of time treating addiction, you could treat depression, you could treat all these things. As a matter of fact, most people are familiar with the idea of 12-step fellowships. There are actually about 78 different 12-step fellowships. So you could say that, well, so if I got off drugs, what if I should switch to something else like gambling or food or shopping or sex or this or that? So the proposed question is, how many different 12-step fellowships would you go to, or could you go to, based on switching addictions? That could be quite a lot. That doesn't seem efficient. It would seem that you're staying at the level of apparent symptoms, you're expecting people to make progress in their life, and they're not making the type of progress that we're thinking of in Buddhism. Because coincidentally, the process of being in recovery and healing is to functionally stop suffering. Just like in Buddhism, like Buddha said, and this is the weird thing that I kind of get into with people, and sometimes people get very upset with me, because I say, okay, you've got clean time. Are you suffering less, more, or about the same as when you came through the rooms of recovery? And most people say it's about the same. As a matter of fact, somebody's going to be coming later today. I was having a conversation with him. He's been clean for about a decade, and he says he is perplexed. He's like, man, I'm doing all the things, I'm like involved with recovery, and my suffering, like, I feel like I'm failing, and I feel like a piece of shit, because the suffering hasn't lifted, and I had this idea and this imagining that I would be traveling without the burden, and I'm like, right, so show up today, and you'll find this out. All right, so that said, so this is where I change the functional argument. The problem is not the drugs, it's not the shopping, it's not the sex. Those are methods of regulating. Now, there is a such thing as substance use disorder. Substance use disorder specifically is defined by one thing: central nervous system adaptation to higher concentrations of a drug, to the extent that if you deprive the body of a specific chemical, the body would go into some advanced state of dysregulation, withdrawal, and depending on what the drug is, death. So I want to be clear. So I'm not saying, oh man, now that we do this today, I can drink beer, I can smoke weed, I can do fentanyl safely. That's not on the menu, and I'll actually explain why it's not advantageous to use substances. So that said, most people are not aware of this, but we have 3 brains. And this is based on the work of, his name is Dr. Paul D. McLean. And actually we've known this since the 60s, that human beings have 3 different brains, and this matters a lot. So at that lower level, the survival brain, which is the brainstem and cerebellum. The brainstem is actually jacked into your spinal cord. It's actually connected to somatics. And so this also means that on the top of your kidney, you have these 2 objects, one on each side. They're called adrenal glands. And what do adrenal glands do? Is anyone aware?
Produce adrenaline.
Huh?
Produce adrenaline.
No, it produces cortisol.
That's it.
Cortisol, war drug. And so if you're under a lot of stress, it's a hormone. So Anyone who has had to be on steroids or hung out with someone who's been on steroids when they're sick, it's not a happy meal. It's a crappy meal that gets supersized. Because they're like, ah! And you're like, but 3 days ago you were such a nice person before you took the steroids. So think of cortisol in that way. So this is one of the reasons that creates dysregulation. So sometimes people who you'll have people, or maybe your own direct experience, who say, I've never been able to trust people, and I think I'm damaged goods because I can't seem to trust or love people. What they may not be aware of is if in utero, if they were in the womb, and the fetus, the baby is under a lot of stress, they're overly exposed to cortisol. So that means that cortisol sensitivity, when you are born, what that does is it makes it more, you're in a pharmacologically imbalanced state. And so it's actually harder to connect with people. And also, people that may not be aware of this, but your brain produces another drug, and this is where the limbic system comes in, oxytocin, which is your love drug. So if there's not enough oxytocin released in the brain, that means that you have a hard time also bonding with people. So a lot of times when people say, it seems like the magic has worn off in a relationship, what's actually going on is that the oxytocin level has decreased, and now you have to work harder to maintain your interpersonal relationship or your partner that you're dating or the person that you've married, because the brain just couldn't sustain infinite production of oxytocin so that you feel good about that person. So that's the survival brain, which is, like I said, the brainstem, cerebellum, fight, flight, freeze, and fawning. Now, people say, how is fawning a survival mechanism? So imagine that fawning is actually getting along with people, and this is what kicks into people who overcompensate, or these are the people pleasers, and the this and that. People pleasing is a method when you feel like you're outside the tribe, where you're trying to get in the tribe by just being like overly gushy, or you'll be overly effusive, you break every boundary just because you want to be a part of the team so much. So it turns out that even fawning, freezing, which is immobilization, flight is obvious, fighting obvious, that these methods, these are basic survival methods. Now, note on the side it says milliseconds. So this is the oldest part of our circuitry. And so, in point of fact, from evolutionary biology, and that's what Dr. McLean was actually working on, and he was also at NIH, is it's about 220 million years old. So when you get into the emotional brain, which is the limbic system, limbic just means ring system, this is where your emotions and your memories are. All of this is explicitly guided by drugs. And so this is my functional argument why you would not want to introduce drugs, because if you're doing drugs, then what that's doing is it alters consciousness, and it makes it more difficult to interact with reality. You can't experience reality as reality is. So that said, memory is neuroencoded, and also this is another interesting thing that people may not be aware of, but you're not choosing the memories that you're going to save. Your thalamus and your hypothalamus are actually choosing what to save and what not to save. And what the reason for the memories is your brain is building stories so you kind of get the gist, so that you don't have to relearn things 1,000 times. It's not like you're coming to something for the first time. And as a matter of fact, memory, and this is where in computing we have what's called distributive computing, where, or there's this thing that's called a RAID, which is a RAID, what is it? Redundant drives, in a group of inexpended redundant drives. So what happens is, to store information, you can have like 3, 5, 10, but the idea in a RAID, or what the brain does, is it spreads the information out all over the brain. It's neuroencoded in your brain tissue, and so what happens is it decides what it's going to save, and it spreads it out all over your head. Why would the brain do that? Why would it do distributive computing, distributive memory? Brain injury. Phineas Gage, he was tamping on a pole. The pole goes up in his brain, and he lost some of his memory in the rhythm of the poem is, and Gage was never himself again. So the brain spreads information out, so if you do lose function in one part of the hemisphere, at least you'll have parts of the memory, even if it's blurry. Also, these two areas of the brain, and that's why they're in red, you can't talk to them, you can't negotiate them with them. When people say, I think this, that, or the other thing, I'm like, if they're really your thoughts, try being up at 3 o'clock in the morning and then tell your brain, shut the F up, and see if it complies. Now, if it complies, it's definitely your brain and your thoughts. But if it keeps going, that might tell you everything that you need to know at that point. So that said, these two areas are closely linked with survival, and they also have the effect of linking primarily to the left hemisphere. And this is, if you're interested in reading some interesting books on authentic brain science, there's Dr. Ian McGilchrist. He's got this book out. It's called The Master and His Emissary. It's a pretty dense tome, but he's a beautiful writer, and also not only a neuroscientist, psychiatrist, addictionologist, but he's also a philosopher. So his work is very beautiful, and his most recent work is called The Matter of Things. It's two dense tombs, but he really gets into it because he's debunking a lot of theory. So that's it. So now the neocortex, oh, and by the way, the limbic system, that's about 55 million years old. So it can take seconds to respond, whereas the brain stem and cerebellum, everything's almost instantaneous. And as a matter of fact, when you're asleep and you hear that weird sound that alerts you that there's a problem or something like that, that wasn't your cortex or your cerebral cortex. That was actually your survival brain that is always on, never turns off. And as a matter of fact, if it did turn off, we would be dead. Because it controls respiration, body temperature, all the things. Make sure that you are, to the best of its ability, regulated. So now the key is, and also please note the amygdala in this area. So the default, the actual challenge for human beings, what actually guides most behavior is not conscious choice. What's actually guiding human behavior is anxiety. Anxiety, most of the choices we're making, whether we're aware of it or not, and that's what defense mechanisms are for, that's what Sigmund Freud got correct, is most of your choices, about 98% in most instances, especially if you don't have a lot of mind training, and this is where it comes in, is most of your choices will actually be attempts to regulate, soothe, compensate, and hydrate, and we'll get into that. And so, which brings us to the cerebral cortex, and this is where your actual personality is, who you think of yourself as a person. This is all in. But it can take minutes to hours, and I've even had things where I was thinking about things for days, trying to wrap my head around it. And so that said, these two lower brain functions or aspects of the brain can override, because they're also older, they're faster, they're actually more powerful because it has access to all the drugs, whereas the cerebral cortex does not. And so that's your higher function in reasoning. This is also what differentiates us from reptiles. So all mammals have these three tiers. And also some people may not be aware of this, and remember, the crux of this argument, I'm giving you a lot of information, but the crux of it, addiction is a reaction to toxic or unhealthy or unmet with anxiety. And that's why people have the tendency to not mix, where you get this like kind of idea of being fully whole or wholly free. AA has this thing called the promises. The Buddha has nirvana, or Buddhism has nirvana, like these ideas of enlightenment, and which is also comical because in Zen world, I'm training a lot of people in Zen, people run to the monastery, I want to be enlightened. I'm like, okay, what's your definition of enlightenment? Say, I don't know, but I read this book and it said it's something that I'm supposed to want. I'm like, so you read a book, you're chasing after something that you don't want, and you're about to sell your car, your life, and everything else to come here and train at the monastery. Wow, you were an exemplary person. I love that. So let's come on inside. We're going to see if we can work this out. And so it's important to have a healthy definition of enlightenment. So this is one that I would like to share with you today, and this is the test drive. Anxiety and challenges are not having an overly outside or overly intrusive impact on your life. You have challenges, you have problems, your brain naturally has anxieties, because that's the friction, that's what keeps us alive. It's kind of like Thich Nhat Hanh, water that is too pure contains no fish, fact. So that's why you need kind of an immune system. And so that said, this is what the argument is about. But imagine that if you didn't understand that anxiety was the driving force, how many mistakes could you make in terms of your reasoning and logic? And that said, the things that are stored in this distributing computing, one of the challenges, by the way, is that memory can have a propensity to be inaccurate and based on perspective. So what I often tell people is, imagine you're in you see, like we're here in Seattle, we see a car crash, but we're all standing around the car from different positions. So everybody thinks they're absolutely right. However, you're standing in a particular position surrounding one reality, which is the car crash. And so you can be absolutely sure, but not have perspective. And this is why relationships matter and being a mammal matters. So mammals also, by the way, are usually, there's only, to my knowledge, one mammal that comes out of eggs, and that's a platypus. But, Tron is laughing. But the issue is, all mammals come out of a womb and also require extended parenting. And so, human beings, by the way, as mammals, we have the least amount of instinct. And the reason why human beings have the least amount of instinct, like if you left it to our own devices to figure it out, we probably wouldn't, and we would die, is the less instincts you have, the more relationships and team building is necessary to survival. And so you can put us pretty much anywhere on the planet, and as long as there are humans who are working in cooperation, we'll actually work it out and we'll survive. And so that's why interpersonal relationships are so important. So this idea, a lot of times that we establish in Western culture about capitalism, and I'm a strong person, lone wolf, I have to go it alone, I gotta figure out my own problems. A distorted sense of self cannot get out of the way of a distorted sense of self. I can only see through my eyes. To have greater perspective on my actual physical presence, I need you. So sometimes I can be hemmed up, I can be upside down thinking about things, and just like in that virtual reality headset of thought, and you'll see my facial expression, you'll say, Seho, are you okay? Your face doesn't look pleasant. And you'll catch them, oh, and it creates an opening to conversation and stabilization. And so human beings are, quite frankly, we're a form of regulation. We have to be able to trust each other, support each other, and be in harmony with each other. So this brings us to the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha. Now, this gets back to the original argument. There's a lot of practices in Buddhism. I've seen a lot, I've done a lot. You know, monastically trained, and a part of a monastic system since 1990. Living 9 years in Japanese monasteries, and there's a reason for that time span. It does make a difference in your training if you have the ability to do things like that. But the issue is this is the starting point of the Four Truths. So the teaching Buddha offered was about suffering. So imagine that what Buddha was actually talking about, so there is sickness, old age, and death. So what Buddha is actually pointing to is there are three very tight points of anxiety or suffering that human beings have, is those three things. And so what he was offering or inviting people into is you could have enlightenment, or as anxiety is not running your life, it's not eating your lunch every day. And because you're not in a state of anxiety, which means you're not contracted. And also, some people understand that contraction piece, but when you're contracted, that also means that you're leaving information out. And that's another challenge of anxiety. And you're also functioning from a lower brain. Information isn't even reaching the neocortex. As a matter of fact, those two lower aspects of the brain can completely knock it offline, that you're in an absolute fight, terror kind of scenario. So that's a dukkha, most people equate with the word suffering. That's not an accurate translation. The word dukkha actually means a potter's wheel, or a wheel that turns out of balance. And so this is the human mind. So the mind operates in such a way that it can be out of harmony with its experience. So that's what it actually means. And so this is, you've seen Einstein, most of you all have seen Einstein's theory of relativity. This is my theory of the entire game. So the S is actually the M part, which is suffering. So you can have amplified anxiety, especially if you haven't been taught to meet yourself and you're always looking outside of yourself for things. Get the cell phone, get the job, get the grade, get the what. So there's that. Then there's unhealthy coping. Unhealthy coping, this is where you get into what we call attachment theory, which is more than just a theory, where you can have anxious, avoidant, insecure attachment types. So what happens is when you come out of the womb, it's an energetic transfer. You can lay a baby on the mother or the father, and the child, now remember, they don't have a lot of development in the neocortex, so they can't even really make things out necessarily, so they don't understand the environment they're in. Everything is a sensation. I'm no longer in the water or the embryonic fluid of the womb. So now that I'm outside the womb, the baby doesn't have language skills, it doesn't know English, it doesn't know Japanese, it doesn't know Finnish. So what's going on is it's having this connection, this physical connect with the family or some caregiver, and so there's an energetic transfer that is involved. And this actually, lo and behold, creates synaptic growth in the brain. And there's even a working theory right now that people who experience, who are neurodivergent, it's possible, what some of the research and the data is showing is that when they came out of the womb and they had those first 4 years of life, they didn't have enough connection with humans, and particularly parents or family members, that the synaptic growth, that energetic transfer didn't take place. That's one of the reasons why we have Sangha. Sangha, a lot of times, makes up for things that we're missing at an early age, and it's a form of compensation, and there is real growth and development there. The second thing is conditioning. These are societal norms and reinforcements, and memory plays a lot into this. And the reason why you have these reinforced patterns like, hello, how are you? Just certain cultural patterns, societal patterns is to help kind of be like the social lubricant so that we're getting along, because my survival in beingness and liberation and freedom is connected to yours, and this is a part of the Mahayana ethos. And so also adding to this is the E part, and the E is the epigenetics. And epigenetics are outside influences that can have unhealthy or negative effect on gene expression. It doesn't alter your DNA, but your genes can be altered or changed. And here's one of the easiest things that people don't think about. What was probably one of the worst things that ever happened in terms of growth and development in culture, in human society? Take a guess. It seems so odd and not odd, but what was that one thing that really messed up human beings?
Civilization, marketing.
Social media.
Farming?
Everything. Yes. Yeah, you got it. Yes. It's the farming. What happened was it was the light bulb. Human beings are not designed to be awake at night. You messed up human beings' circadian rhythms. Sleeping at night is a critical feature, because what happens is I can even show you brain imaging where fluid is literally moving up the brainstem when you're sleeping at night, and it actually cleans out the brain, because in order to run a human brain, it's damaged during the day. And so without the fluidic transfer and the cleaning up and all that stuff, you actually can produce a worse human being in terms of behavior, attitude, attention span, anxiety. You can throw that person off the chart. And so the invention of the light bulb, as it turns out, created, well, you could farm at night because this and that, you had lanterns and this and that and the other things. People kind of figured it out. But that created a 24-hour work cycle. Human beings are not designed for 24-hour loops. And also, if you think that you're making a human being's life better, well, they can, they work at night, but they can sleep during the day. I'm sorry, but your 220 million-year-old brain and body is not calibrated for Walmart. It's calibrated for that original way of being. You know, Noah in the Refuge Recovery books talks about we are not developed for, we have a brain that's more developed for the Serengeti Plain and surviving saber-toothed tigers and dinosaurs than surviving buy one, get ones, you know, at Apple or something like that. So that's it. So the real meaningful, so that's an example of epigenetics where we've altered people. Also, GMO, genetically modified food has altered people. I have a daughter. Normally, physical development was normally happening at the teens. My daughter, name's Kayla, she started developing at 10 and a half years old. And there was a lot of crisis with that, so we took her to Children's Hospital up in Wilmington, Delaware. Was speaking to a doctor about it, and he says, oh, it's the hormones in the food. He says, if you want to improve your child's life, and he says, you're going to be angry at this because there's a joke, whole food, whole paycheck. There's reality to that. That based on, he's like, we're organisms, we're analog devices. And so if you start putting all these chemicals and things like that, where you're just trying to extend or expand or prolong food production without understanding the cost and the consequence of that, you're going to be a very problematic person. And so that's why so many of these illnesses and things that we have, we've lost a lot of that strictly based on food. So that's another example of epigenetics. So if you think that it's theoretical, it's not. And so the point of this particular screen is the problem or the challenge for us is not just anxiety, but once you start stacking trauma, maladaptive attachment styles, epigenetics, and all these things, we're in actually a worse position than we could ever imagine, and this is why practice matters so much. This is me at 15 years clean. This is me. Okay, now I was still collecting. I've been in recovery for, I'm embarrassed to say this. People say, you look so young. And I'm like, it's melanin. So I've been in recovery for 38 years. I got clean when I was like 18 years old. All right, so I've collected medallions every year, but when my marriage was collapsing, what happened was I had a lot of my anxiety just completely spiked because I was like, oh my God, my kids are gonna call somebody else dad, like all the things. What about this? What about that? College, I had this dream, my kids were gonna, all the things, and so the maladaptive coping mechanism that I used was not drugs. I haven't thought about using drugs in 7 years clean. The coping mechanism was the food. And that's what I was using to compensate and regulate my anxiety. Some people use gambling, some people use sex, some people use Facebook, some people use a lot of things. But if we don't have attention to what the mind is doing to regulate or guiding us to do from the brainstem, we're gonna have a very difficult experience. And so I wanted to show you the tangible, and by the way, this is the day before I went for bariatric surgery. On the day that I went in for my surgery, this was me at 510 pounds and physically dying, not based on drug use, but food use. So the invitation could be to consider and think about what are the ways that I'm using to cope or get by. You know, what's my comfort food? You know, like honestly, I still have this thing. It's like Swedish fish. That's my go-to. so I'm not lying. John and Bree know me, so they'll tell you all the things. So that's it. So there is this duality of mind that's produced. So part where you have this idea that you're actually having a conversation with yourself, and oh, that's just crazy. Actually, it's true. Human beings are conversational beings, and we have an internal dialoguing system. We used to call it the inner child. The more modern part, it's called IFS, which is called Internal Family Systems by Dr. Richard Schwartz. If you look at his work, it is absolutely brilliant. And it gets at a lot of these things that there are no bad parts, is literally the name of one of those books. But where people would euphemistically describe, I got an angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other shoulder, that's very accurate to the case. You have kind of like the negative poster side, that one that's always posting like, you suck and you're never gonna get better side. And then there's the other, but you can do it, and you're so great, and you're just never gonna give up, you know, but you'll get there someday. But that's actually going on. The only problem is that the left hemisphere that's producing the argument is 3 times stronger than the right hemisphere brain function that's putting things in context, because you have the left hemisphere combined with the limbic system, combined with the brainstem. And so it's basically 3 against 1. And also, if you think that your left and right hemisphere are physically touching, they are not. They are truly separate. And the only thing that's connecting the brain is there's a connector at the bottom. It drops out of consciousness right now, but corpus callosum. Think, doctor. I love medical people. So the corpus callosum is the point where it connects, and it allows for that informational flow between the two, and it's harmonized with executive function. I know that Sigmund Freud gets a really hard rap, and he did a lot of cocaine, but he wasn't wrong about everything. Sometimes cocaine addicts, they're actually right about a couple things. So we'll give them credit. Okay, so this piece is, and I'm gonna, what's the time cutoff, Bree?
11:10.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to push hard. So I'm gonna go fast, but also, by the way, I have this in PDF format, and I can, Bree or myself can email this to you during this presentation so you can have it in your cell phone. But I want you to have this because this is a tool for you. But I'm showing you, okay, so there's this thing called the Buddhist Wheel of Life. And so normally it's got like a demon and it's holding this wheel, and there's normally like some version of a clock, or there's time, and it talks about the realms and all this thing, and people are like looking at it and saying, holy guacamole, what did I get myself into? This looks like a cult. And it's very scary. So, and this is also the second truth. So this is samadaya. And samadaya is anxiety, is trishna, or craving. So because of these states, which you see in the center point where it says emotional state, I changed the word realms to states. So human beings are passing in and out of states all the time, and sometimes we have a tendency to be in one or more states. Consciousness and attention can do that. You can actually have the experience of being in more like a blended state or more than one state at a time. Your brain is probably one of the most sophisticated tools in the universe. So that said, so these particular states, like the restless state, obvious, comparing state, measuring the curtains, what's my relationship, do they love me? If they tell me that they love me enough, then honestly, that's the satiation. Shutdown state, these are the people who are isolated, people who have a tendency to be overwhelmed, just kind of run from scenarios. The restless state, this is the irritability. The mind is in a dysregulated state, and also these are people who also have a tendency towards trauma. They're looking for the threat, they're waiting for the shoe to drop, and then the craving state, that there's always something missing, and it looks like a misspelled missing. So, but that said, so there's the craving state. So this is, like I said, normally described as realms like jealous states, God states, flaming states and things like that. So you'll see that, but this is the reorientation and the more difficult part for people to relate to. And this is, in Buddhism, this is one of the most difficult things to try and explain. We normally get to a lot of lengths. I don't particularly, especially it's easy if you do it through Buddha's actual lens and just retranslate properly through the colloquialisms. And that's what a part of this direct training is for, is we can give you the direct teaching. So it starts with there's a sensation or the idea, the imposition of there's a disconnection. Then there's the shaping of that disconnection, so early experiences. So you're running a loop of, you start comparing. So organized awareness. Awareness is always in a state of organization, but it can be organized towards threat, or it can be organized in the direction of love. And here's the connector, where a lot of times, and this is where this could spark a lot of debate, I firmly don't agree with mindfulness. Mindfulness is very problematic because we don't have control over the mind. As a matter of fact, it's running its own ops. So the next question people ask me is, if we're not doing mindfulness, then what are we actually doing? What Buddha told us to do, attention, pay attention. And so the one thing that is outside of mind is attention. It turns out that attention is the interface to awareness. So that's the tool that awareness uses. And so you can direct attention kind of like a spotlight, or like in a tower, the Tower of Sauron, you know, the eye. You can actually direct that eye and what it's actually pointed towards. And so what I invite people to try, not buy, is take responsibility. And this is one of the things that's interesting. People sometimes, the refuge recovery persons will miss, is Noah actually says quite a bit about attention. And then he has this section of the book, and it cracks me up every time I read it. It makes me laugh so much. I read it out loud, and I kind of giggle. Because he says, whose mind is it anyway? You know, because, you know, well, whose mind? It's obviously not mine, because if it was my mind, why would I be bothering to argue with myself all day and all night? So then there's the, like, I mean, imagine that you're like spending time, you're losing time arguing with yourself. If it was really you, you'd just be like, decision made, I'm going on, I sally forth through the universe. So that said, the deficient story is the mind runs a negative narrative, and this is running very strictly out of the left hemisphere brain function. Then there's the overwhelm. Now, there's an interesting thing, by the way. So once you get to the overwhelming the senses, so through the body, the somatic process, your body's now flooding with cortisol, adrenaline, you're producing less oxytocin in the brain, there's more adrenaline available, GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, and I'm dropping out on one of the neurochemicals, so maybe Eric will remind me, but the neurochemical that produces calm, Eric's a brilliant person. So without those things, you're in this overwhelmed state. What begins to happen is that it actually strengthens that left hemispheric gachibri, that left hemisphere brain function, so 5 minutes. So that's it. So then you're left with the sting, which is the shame, which is a subroutine of mind. All of this is running the left hemisphere. Now remember, this extends anxiety. So everything is like amplifying anxiety. So then there's the substances that well, let me get high. Okay, so the first thing that happens when you get high is you're high. So that means you're no longer in conscious relationship with reality. And this is also one of the difference between process addictions and substance use disorder. Substance use disorders alter consciousness, whereas mood disorder, process addictions regulate and change the mood. So that's the actual difference. And so then there's the relief, and it becomes a compulsory loop. So that which you're seeking temporary relief is also destroying you at the same time. And then there's the becoming the state, then you go into acting out, and then the weight that we carry, and the weight that we carry is functionally, it's the regret. And so your mind is wrapped around that, and it just becomes a TV show. So that said, so this brings us to Naroda, which is as Noah likes to say, Noah Levine from Dharma Punx, meditate and destroy. So how we do that, this isn't the same type of destruction. You could think of it as composting. You could look at it as integrating, is through equanimity. And so the opposite of these states, and this is where, like, a lot of times people say dualism is bad. Dualism is not bad. They say, but all the books on Buddhism say that it's bad. I'm like, if dualism were bad, try to be in a non-dual state and try to make it across the street in Seattle and see how it works out. You will die. So that said, so dualism helps you know in the framework of where we physically are how to navigate in a healthier rather than unhealthy way. So having a sense of groundedness, appreciation, authenticity, and integrity, these things are critical to freedom and to suffering. Having a sense of embodiment. Embodiment is that you have that sense of authenticity and integrity and are able to actually make use of it. It's not just a philosophy. And then it requires courage and fortitude. Fortitude is an interesting word because fortitude is the spiritual strength for the endurance of hardship. So what that really means in a more plainative way is you have to develop the quality or the ability towards stress tolerance. That means that when you're in recovery and you're with your mentor or your sponsor or your friend, or if you're in educational circles, you have a preceptor, you have to be able to hear difficult information about how you're doing and then integrate it, process it, and make good use of it without hating other people. And that's why so many people avoid or run from sponsors or mentors, because the sponsor isn't there to coddle or improve your ego. Like recovery, Dharma practice, this is not to learn how to get stellar at suffering. It's really to end suffering. And suffering is just being engaged in narratives of mind. And then there's aligned action and then the integration. And this is, so 1 minute. So some people don't know this. And this is where I'll end at this time. Because what we'll end is the path. So here we go. If you get hit by a car and you show up in court and you win your case, you'll get $30,000 to $50,000, like they call it pain and suffering. So you get the $50,000 for the pain, but you'll get $10 million for the suffering. Why? The answer is, and I've mentored and sponsored a couple of lawyers in my lifetime, is the lawyer will tell you because they're trying to throw such a big number at the suffering piece that it hopes that the number satisfies your mind. The story that your mind generates about the original pain. Oh my God. Like, let me tell you, Bree, I got into the car crash, man, that thing ran over my foot, and it reminded me of my brother whipping my butt when I was 12 years old, and that other time, so it's just this conflation. So what happens is the money is for the suffering, is about the narrator of the mind, that left hemisphere brain function, and that's why you'll get $50,000 for pain, but you'll get $10 million for suffering. Because the suffering is the anxiety. So we'll take a break, about a 5-minute break, so you can stretch, walk around for those vapors in kind. I'm sure that they'll say don't do it on the property. Is that true, Bree?
You can go right out on the porch.
Yeah, but I need you all to be strict to the time agreements if you need to use a laboratory or whatever, but because I want to honor those timelines. Thank you. Power to the people.
I needed to talk to him before I accepted my settlement. They didn't give me shit for suffering.
Do what?
I just got a car accident settlement. I should have talked to you before I took it.
Oh, so do what? Hold on, wait, let me.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries.
So I can log it when I get home.
Yeah.
Keep it on the TV all
Yeah.
day.
I'm
also gonna change where the money pit is, now that we're not in the middle of something.
And so until 11:35, you have guided meditation.
Can show you something, but it's temporary. And,
There, this
not
makes
like- not
way
like
more
long-term
sense.
Meditation.
All right, and anybody who gives you the
He was big
thing,
on
and then
like
I'll
proving
I can email
logically.
Okay, yeah, I will maybe, announce before lunch, a place for them to write their emails down.
right, and that'll be the perfect spot
Yeah,
to email them.
sometimes
You were
he,
brilliant.
I know.
Are we gonna,
quote him, but he also
are we gonna
felt
attach,
a little more,
like, how broadly do you want it?
Because you are.
because I always see when he takes me to Houston, because he sees like,
You can do whatever you
it's
think
like,
is wise, 'cause you're
might have had a drink or something.
Sure.
and it's like
I mean, that's,
sitting on a
we can
concert
email it to
party
people,
for an hour
that's just a
discussion.
way, then it can just be on the internet as well.
With an
Or
Oh, okay.
the video with like,
Or,
Yeah,
well,
but
if they did
the
the
more I
video,
listen
then
to him, I mean-
whatever you think is wise.
Yeah, I like Ron Doss as well.
how do you turn off, your, never mind. I was gonna try and fix the lighting of the camera for the projector.
I
But Bree's in the way, so
Yeah.
you're gonna get blasted in the eyes, so.
Bree is never
Makes sense.
What do you need?
I feel like
I'm
not-
adjusting camera settings, it's like washed out with
like
the
Delta
projector.
super deep, just like.
Cause we're
Yeah,
in between stuff.
delve into both fairly deep, I suppose.
So,
Alright, that's gonna work better.
Ramdas.
Are you the parking lot across the street is mine, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yep. That goes to the church.
Right on, hail to the beloved. Ramdas, man, I was a hippie, man. And I did some Grateful Dead shows, man. I have like permanent tour tickets.
You are the funniest monk.
It was the PCP at 17 years old that did it. It left the humor just completely available one day.
So what I'm hearing is I should take PCP.
No. You missed your opportunity for the encyclopedia.
The alternate path to enlightenment is.
Right. Now you have to deal with the hard way. You have to prick your mind in your booty and like sit there and pretzels for hours. Your feet are going to sleep and you'll say, what does Noah like to say? It all has come down to this.
Alright. I'm gonna go,
Would you like to sit beside me or would you like
either wherever you,
to?
wherever you wanna be. a comfortable way to sit that is upright. The posture upright, signaling to our bodies and to our minds an intention to wake up. As you guide your attention to the breath, holding that intention in the background, the desire to be free. And finding the breath wherever it comes and goes most easily, either at the base of the nostrils or in the rise and fall of the chest or abdomen. Picking one place and sticking with it. Often in our meditations, we want to run off and begin figuring things out, thinking, planning, trying to make the best of our time. And an encouragement to stay with the breath. That this lays the foundation for wisdom to be born. And if you're focusing on the nose, expand the breath to the belly, or if you're at the chest or belly, expanding the breath to the nose and allowing, like a buoy, following the breath from one point to the other. And as you inhale, the breath spreading to the crown of the head. And as you exhale, the breath falling through the torso, legs down through the feet. Naturally, the mind is going to have desire, craving, anxiety. This is status quo, and through the awareness, begin to observe. Seeing for yourself what is true about your mind's tendency like a scientist watching their experiment. Each time you are noticing the attention wanders, attempt to note fantasy, memory, craving, or hatred. Craving and hatred. And then return to the breath. If you find the mind is restless, difficult to bring back, remind yourself of your intention. Your resolve. The resolve to be free from behaviors that cause harm to ourselves and others. To be free from suffering. To love those we love better. Our minds will convince us there are better things to think about, like what's for lunch. Coming back. as we come to the last few moments of the meditation, continuing to follow the breath. And resist the temptation to shake off the meditation as the bell rings, letting the breath be the bridge from the formal meditation to the living meditation.
Thank you, Bree. Bree has a very important job, responsibility. At the monastery, the role is called Jiki-jitsu. And Jiki-jitsu means the one who is straight and vertical in the practice all day. Other people may fall down, but they cannot. And I really appreciate Bree's practice because it's always, for the community here in Seattle, inadvertently been Jiki-jitsu. This time is Mondo. Mondo is dialectical. So you can, like someone said, well, if you got down to the most simplest terms, what is this? I said, have you ever seen Beat the Priest on Saturday Night Live? It's relative to that. So you can ask questions. I prefer not philosophical questions because Buddhism is not a philosophy, it's a way of being, as Bree stated during the meditation. And fire away, we have until noon. And you can raise your hand to be recognized, and then, hi.
Hello. Thank you. Thanks, Bruce. What do you do? Like, what do you do when your brain is like really just kind of unsettled? Feels like you have little fireflies like flying around in your mind when you're trying to meditate. Like, what is there? You just let it be that way. Like, how do you address that? How do you get to the better place or the more calm place?
In practice, there's things that we do that to honestly take command of the attention, because the mind is always doing what it's doing. It's running its own ops, functionally. And so the idea is, how do I establish direct alert connection with attention and direct the attention kind of like to the right hemisphere, quite frankly. And so the methods we use are mantra. Mantra literally means that which protects the mind from its own natural negativity, because that's what it is. The mind needs us to suffer, so it has a reflection of itself. And so I mean, at the monastery we have these very short mantras like Namo Dai Bo Sa, or in the Tibetan lineage, the one I tend to use a lot is I'll say like Om Hum Bezaguru Bama Sada 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 Om. And so also with the mantra, you can also use the mala. In the mala, you can put your attention in the mala. So Om Hum. So you also have the tactile. Some people use a stone. But the Om Hum Bezaguru Bama Sada Om Ha Bezaguru Bama Sada Om Ha Bezaguru Bama Sada. And so what you're doing is, when you start to do that, the attention becomes a lot clearer. Some people use koans, like the easiest one for most people to pick up is what is this? Another method is counting the breath. So you count traditionally in Zen world, that's normally the first practice. You just count 1 to 10, counting the inhalations. And then when you realize you're at 2,224, you just return to 1 and you go back into the cycle. Because that, there's a psychologist, he calls it Jonathan Goodman something. He's from Stanford, but he calls it mind wandering. That the attention, the awareness, it kind of wanders away, and you have to just bring it back, but not be mean or gruff or criticize oneself.
Thank you.
Hey. Which is Japanese for yes. We're just kind of traditional. Or Ram Dass, because Mike was talking about it earlier. His was, even up to the point that he was dying, he would have his Tulsi seed mala, and Ram Dass was saying, I am loving awareness, I am loving awareness. And that whole practice helped him through his own anxiety and as it related to his death, his non-beingness, that's how he managed his process.
Can a mantra just be anything that you choose that helps you focus?
Yes, that you have a connection with. And that's important too, to personalize the practice, because here's where I start criticizing. Too much of the time, people are picking up practices that don't authentically resonate with their nature and who they are, and then beat up on themselves and criticize themselves. Oh, I am the worst meditator. Oh my God! Like when I lived at a particular monastery, one of my Dharma brothers, one of the other monks, he found out that I was chanting in my head the Heart Sutra, and he said, Seiho, you're not supposed to chant the Heart Sutra. You are just, moo. And I said, that's really weird because Roshi said it was okay and told me to do it. You see what I'm saying? Because, and this was with Luishitsu Edo Shimano Roshi. So he was very in the know of the practice. He's like, Seiho doesn't even understand what the word mu means in the context of our culture, but he does understand the Heart Sutra. And so that was my practice, and that's what I used for the longest time. So people have to use tools that authentically resonate. There's no glory in accepting practices or taking up practices where you just end up battling with yourself. Like people battle sometimes over the chair. Like, well, you sit on zabutons and those pillow cushions, and you can do Burmese, or sometimes like if my knees are good, I can do full lotus. I want to look like you. I'm like, this isn't about looking. This is about the actual practice. And so your body, it may not be made for a meditation cushion. Your body may be made for a chair or a seiza bench or something like that. So some people have to practice standing up, but you have to adjust the practice is, the key point is, what is the relationship with the attention? And is it in the actual practice, when you really get down to it, like once you stabilize the attention, that's why you use the mantra and things like that, so it's attention stabilization. Then the practice after that is just notice what's actually happening without going away from the noticing. And you're with reality. We're never out of reality, but we don't usually notice it because there's so much intrusive thought kind of jumping in and categorizing, narrating, and all of that. And that's used to kind of keep us as human beings as meat puppets in service to it. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, but whatever your mantra is, whatever you choose, except Arby's and it tastes great, that might not work out. Just make you hungrier. Eric.
Thinking about not really complacency, but how to, and this I guess can come from anybody, like strategies and ways to develop consistency in practice, because I do have the value of maintaining that and it works for me, but my mind can easily take me off track without even realizing it and get out of consistent practice. And I guess if that is either just sitting or like even other ways, and I do a lot of walking meditation, but it's kind of like almost a cop out for me when I think about it. So just trying to see how to maintain the consistency of practice.
To maintain consistency in practice is stop listening to the mind. Because you said something interesting, and so this is why I'm so happy to be here, because this is the opportunity in the mondo, in the dialogue. It's not our mind. It's the mind. It's a mind, and it is not. That's the point of the book of with Ian McGilchrist, the emissary and the master, because the emissary, the mind, becomes the master. It puts itself in the seat of control, and so it makes these suggestions. It sounds kind of like me, and I kind of do like that. Go out, get a bag of Swedish fish. It's only $1.78. You're away from the East Coast. Your friends aren't going to know and figure it out. Surely by the time you get back, and instantly, if my attention bonds to the narrative, that's exactly what it wants. The mind is walking around with an electric spaghetti gun, trying to see what sticks. And if anything sticks, it knows what sticks by what the attention locks to. So the simplest thing that I could say is like, it's Choboji. When the bell rings, sit. When the bell rings at the end, and there's, get up. And if it's one clap, it's kinhin. And no hesitation. Don't hold back. And any holding back, it's like almost a gap. That's where thinking mind is instantiating itself. And it's trying to use these, is it like vice grips or reverse vice grips? Where it's trying to open the space so it can seize that dominance. It seems evil and negative. It's not. It thinks it's actually protecting us. It's doing a lot of work to manage us. And if we actually have those conversations with it, we'll discover it thinks that we're very irresponsible people. So the other thing that we can do is have a written on a piece of paper, these are the things that I'm definitely going to do. And just do them without hesitation, negotiation. Don't say, oh, well, I only have 30 minutes left. I'm not going to be able to do it for 60 minutes like go to the gym. Still go. It's going through, it's forming the habit energy in the process of doing it. And so what happens over time is that becomes our natural sort of default. So here's a practice that seems not like meditation, but it actually turns out to be. Somehow to awareness, the intuitive right hemisphere side, the person will drift into consciousness. Haven't thought about the person, I have no contact with the person. I know it's not coming, I name my left hemisphere turd, because it's just always posting like negative stuff all the time to me, and wants me to read and scroll over everything it's saying. But I'll wake up and somebody will be in consciousness. It'll be a person. And I used to I go through all the things. Instead of going through that, I would just directly pick up the phone and I would text them if it was appropriate hour, or call them and just touch base and do relational connection. And so I invite people to listen to the intuition, which is more aligned with our values and who we are, rather than that other side that's like kind of a shady negotiator, and trying to get us to do things that are functionally against our values or what we're actually intending for ourselves. The punchline to all of this is the goal of the mind, as it turns out, is it deliberately, the left hemisphere needs us to suffer. And the reason why it needs us to suffer more than experience pain is that's the only way that it honestly has a reflection of itself. Whereas the right hemisphere is contextual, it's very abstract, it's samadhi, you're not divided in any way to your experience. You're in a flow state. When we're in a flow state, the left hemisphere cannot recognize itself, and so it's operating under an assumption that it might be dead. And so it creates churn so that it has a sense that it's alive. And so that's the purpose that the suffering serves to the left hemisphere. So, and it's not mean, it's just, it doesn't want to die. It wants to know that it's here. Is that helpful? We have 8 minutes. It's okay to be vulnerable.
One more thing.
Hi.
And I don't know how, just want your perspective. I don't really try to proselytize meditation necessarily, but I do try to bring it up to other people that it can be helpful. A lot of people that are in an active addiction or in recovery, but also a lot of people that have a lot, pretty acute anxiety issues or schizophrenia, like psychotic disorders, find it very difficult to, they find it very difficult a lot of the time to do traditional zazen or sitting meditation. Want to hear your perspective on that, maybe, if you have any experience with that.
Oh, 1,000%. So this is a very interesting point because at the monastery, in terms of Zen, we're very careful with people because when you're doing zazen, it's straight ahead, it's don't move, maintain the posture, whatever that practice is that you're doing, do that practice. And so it's very private because you really don't know what they're doing. Like when I first went to the monastery, I was like, honestly, because I didn't really meditate, so it was so painful at DBZ. The sits were 50 minutes long, and we would sit for 3 hours at night. We were sitting a minimum of 6 hours a day, sometimes doing sesshin about 17 hours a day. So I was like in my head, and they were saying, do this. And I was baking cakes. I was watching episodes of the Brady Bunch. I was trying to figure out what was going on between Jan and Greg, or Marcia and Greg. I was doing all these things. I was running episodes of Father's Knows Best. That'll start to tell you what my age is like. And then I went to Roshi, and I said, all these things are happening, you know. And he said, well, why don't you consider guided meditations? And so back then we had tapes and audios and stuff like that, or in Dharma talks and teishos. And so what I would do is I would start doing that. And that's one of the things that I really love about Dharma Punx and refuge recovery and Theravadan practice, is that there's a strong tendency towards guided meditation. So you don't have the sense of being locked in. You're following a story. All you have to do is pay attention and be with the narrative. And that's why I like Bree being Jikijitsu today. She is a very good meditation teacher, instructor. Like there's people who can teach how to meditate, like kind of how to do the practice, and then there are people who are artistic with the practice, where when they're giving you the guide, it's there's that embodiment piece. And so doing guided meditation, that's what I recommend, especially for people who have anxiety, mental health challenges, or use something. And here's where it even gets scarier. I had a person say, the only time my head goes nowhere is when I'm free rock climbing. I said, well, I hope like hell your head's not going anywhere. You don't want to be baking cakes then, bro. So trust me, you'll be gone. And he said, but it's not like you. I'm not pretzeled up. I'm not in the posture of the Buddha. I'm like, that's ridiculous. You're in service to an idea. So for some people, like I've been to 1,000 meetings, literally, where there's that person doing crochet or macrame. I honestly don't know the difference, but there's needles going and there's things happening, and they're churning things out. So it's awesome. Hope I earn a scarf someday. But that said, there are people who play guitar, and that's a very active meditation. But the idea behind the ultimate meditation practice is where there's no distance, there's no space, there's no time, there's samadhi. There's undivided awareness. It's just this, and without negotiating for something else. And so those are acceptable. And so Buddha's literal response to that was, he used this expression, but it meant more than that, because he was like kind of like shorthanding, where he said there are 4 postures. So there's the sitting, there's the lying down, there's standing, and there's walking. So if, this being the Pacific Northwest, if you went out on a hike, that would be a form of meditation. As a matter of fact, when I met John and Bree back in the day, incarnation, I think it was Rebel Saints Go Marching or something like that. We were doing something, but we were going on hikes and stuff, and it was so beautiful, and it was such an intimate, lovely time. I have a lot of great experiences from that, but those are valid forms of meditation. So it's not always being in the formal Burmese or Lotus or this or that. And I recommend that for people who are struggling, because the idea is, if we're too in service to an idea, that's problematic. And what we really could be in service to is the elimination of suffering. That's what I'm in service to.
12 p.m. on the dot.
The monk rolls. I'm a high roller. Thank you. So we'll take a break. It's 1 hour. Please be back promptly. We'll start into the second half, and there will be more opportunities for Mondo and meditation practice. I invite you to not just chitter-chatter about the price of eggs or Honestly, this is going to be tough, and this is going to seem hard, or what's going on in terms of what's on blast in social media. The invitation is going out with people and talking about your authentic experience without shielding. You know, what's the anxiety? What's honestly what's been burning you up, or perplexing you, or vexing you, and having these authentic conversations, because this, Ichigo, this is one time, one practice. I may never be here again. You know, I could be dead. You could be dead. We don't know. I have a friend, Tabitha. She had 19 years clean. She found out she had cancer 2.5 months ago, and she died last Saturday. And she's 50 years old. She wasn't planning on dying. Thank you.
One quick announcement from me. I'm gonna have a paper up here for you to write your email on if you would like a copy of the PowerPoint that Seho has. Additionally, yeah, there's tons of food on the Ave 2 blocks away. Go get some food. If you come back and are bored, there's tons of free literature here that is free for the taking. Thumb your way through, sit down and meditate, and yeah, please be back at 1 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna shut down the stream and restart it when we start again.
Thank you.
Also, should probably put my laptop in.
If you need, I have a charger. I used to live in Seattle. I'm going to move back to Seattle, probably within the next year or two.
Yeah.
For sure.
Where's your Delaware on these sides?
No, I actually, Cambridge, Maryland, that's where I live. I went for a treatment center, but in between there and the monastery, I live in New York. So
What?
there,
Yeah, that would be great. Mine's much smaller. Yeah, it's a tiny one.
Yeah, I know that the East Coast is so different. It's like,
Do you gotta run, or are you gonna come
Yeah.
get food?
they're very